Good evening, students. I'm Miss Vinaya Jaitapkar, and today we are going to study a new topic, respiration in plants. Now, this topic is related to the previous chapter which we have studied, that is photosynthesis, in which we have already studied how the substrates which are utilized in respiration are formed. In this chapter, we are going to study the introduction, that means what is meant by respiration exactly. Then we will go for first we will study what is the introduction, what is respiration exactly. Then we are going to deal with the types of respiration, what are the different kinds of respiration and what is the differences between them. Then we are going to study an important pathway of respiration, rather three important pathways of respiration, that is glycolysis. The second one is Krebs cycle, which is also called as TCA cycle. Then we are going to study what is oxidative phosphorylation. It is electron transport system. Then the next topic is fermentation. It is a kind of anaerobic respiration. Then we will study why respiration is called as amphibolic pathway. And then we will study what is respiratory quotient. So in today's class, we'll be studying the first three topics, that is introduction about respiration, what are the different types of respiration, and what is glycolysis. Now let us check what is respiration exactly. Whenever the word respiration comes, what comes in our mind? That is the breathing, which is intake of O2 and removal of carbon dioxide, what we have studied since our childhood. The breathing is the intake of oxygen through our nose or the respiratory system, and the removal of carbon dioxide occurs through the nose itself. In this case, the oxygen is absorbed in our blood and the carbon dioxide from the different tissues is taken to the lungs, from where it is released out again through the nasal passage or nasal passage. But is it the only concept of respiration? Definitely no. It includes a part of respiration which is called as breathing. Okay. And when we are talking about respiration, we are talking about breathing as well as the second step, which is a very, very important step, that is breakdown of complex substances. It is a very, very important concept, that is breakdown of complex substances to form energy rich compound, that is nothing but ATP. Now, what is the long form of ATP? We already know this. It is adenosine. It is adenosine. T stands for tri and P stands for phosphate. So the long form of ATP is adenosine triphosphate. This adenosine is a kind of nucleoside. This is a nucleoside to which three phosphate groups are attached. This is known as adenosine triphosphate, which is an energy rich compound which will be actually saved as the energy currency in our body. Now, when we are talking about the respiration, we are mainly talking about this breathing as well as the breakdown of complex substances. And when we are talking particularly about the cellular respiration, now breakdown of complex substances to get the energy, this process is occurring inside the cell. Okay. So when we are talking about the respiratory process which is occurring inside the cell, this is known as cellular respiration. What it is called? It is called as cellular respiration. Now, the next question which arises in our mind is, do plants breathe? Do plants respire? If yes, then when they are respiring, whether they are respiring in the daytime or they are respiring in the night. Okay, so the plants always respire, whether it is a day or it is night. Generally, the respiration is going on throughout the day or night because it is a cellular process. Okay, it is a cellular process. It is occurring inside the cell and it occurs whenever there is the need of energy. Okay, whenever there is need of energy, the plants breathe the cellular respiration is carried out, and there is formation of an energy rich compound which is called as ATP. And here we can see that from where this ATP is generally obtained, it is obtained from the simple sugar or the basic sugar, it is glucose. Okay. So glucose is the main sugar which is utilized into the cell to form the energy-rich compound called as ATP, that is adenosine triphosphate. Okay. Now next we will study another important point, that is types of respiration. What are the different types of respiration? Now, the types of respiration are based on whether there is involvement of oxygen into the respiratory process or there is no involvement of the oxygen. That means whether the oxygen is present in the respiration or it is absent in the respiration. On the basis of that, the respiration is divided into two types, that is aerobic respiration and the second one is anaerobic respiration. Now we will study in detail what is the meaning of aerobic and what is the meaning of anaerobic respiration. So in aerobic respiration, there is involvement of oxygen. Means this respiration occurs in presence of oxygen, whereas the anaerobic respiration occurs in absence of oxygen. Clear to all? I'll repeat again. Aerobic respiration occurs in presence of oxygen and anaerobic respiration occurs in absence of oxygen. Okay. Now, in both the cases, you can see that in aerobic respiration as well as anaerobic respiration, if you will see the product side, you can see one thing is common, that is carbon dioxide. Okay. Whether it is aerobic respiration or anaerobic respiration, you can see carbon dioxide at the product side. And that's why both these kind of respirations are the decarboxylation reactions. Clear? These are decarboxylation reactions. What do you mean by decarboxylation? D is removal and carboxyl is related to carbon dioxide. So decarboxylation means removal of carbon dioxide. Clear? So in aerobic respiration as well as in a particular type of anaerobic respiration, carbon dioxide is evolved and that's why they are called as decarboxylation reactions only. Now let us okay, let us study what is the meaning of aerobic respiration and what is anaerobic respiration. So in aerobic respiration, the glucose in first step is converted into pyruvic acid. In the first step, it is converted into pyruvic acid and this reaction takes place in absence of O2. Okay. In the first step of aerobic respiration, the glucose is converted into pyruvic acid and this reaction takes place in absence of O2. Okay. This reaction occurs in the cytoplasm because the enzymes which are required to break the glucose into pyruvic acids are present in the soluble form inside the cytoplasm. And that's why these reactions occur in the cytoplasm itself. This process is known as glycolysis. Okay, the process is known as glycolysis. Now the question is, if it takes place in absence of O2, then why it is termed as aerobic respiration, right? It should be an anaerobic respiration. But whether it is aerobic or anaerobic respiration, the glucose is broken down into pyruvic acid always in absence of O2. There is no oxygen involved in this reaction. But the next step in case of aerobic respiration, in which the pyruvic acid is decarboxylated to give rise to carbon dioxide and water along with the energy-rich molecule ATP occurs in presence of oxygen. Clear? So the next step in this respiratory pathway occurs in presence of O2 and that's why it is termed as aerobic respiration. Now, we have seen that the glucose is converted into pyruvic acid in the cytoplasm. The next step of this pathway, that is conversion of pyruvic acid into carbon dioxide, water and energy rich compound, occurs in mitochondrion. Okay, it occurs in mitochondrion. Now when we are talking about the single mitochondrion, we will call it as mitochondrion, and when we are talking about the plural term, we call it as mitochondria. Okay, so it occurs in the mitochondrion and it is called as Krebs cycle. Okay, it is called as Krebs cycle. Now, in this case, the ATPs which are generated are stored inside the mitochondrion, and this is the reason why mitochondrion is called as powerhouse of cell. Clear? Why it is called as powerhouse of the cell? Because the energy-rich compound ATP, which is generated during the respiratory pathway or respiratory process, is stored into the mitochondrion, and that's why called as powerhouse of cell. Okay, let us revise once again what is aerobic respiration. In aerobic respiration, in the first step, glucose is converted into pyruvic acid. This reaction occurs in absence of O2. The reaction takes place in cytoplasm as the enzymes required for this process are present inside the cytoplasm, and the reaction is known as glycolysis. Now, why it is called as glycolysis? We will study later on when we will study the glycolytic pathway. Pyruvic acid, which is formed in this reaction, is further converted into carbon dioxide, water, and ATPs, which are the energy-rich molecules, in presence of oxygen, and the reaction occur in mitochondrion, and this reaction or the pathway is termed as Krebs cycle, which is coupled with another pathway which is called as electron transport system, or it is also called as oxidative phosphorylation. And on completion of these two pathways, there will be generation of energy rich compounds which are ATPs. Now let us talk about the anaerobic respiration. What is difference between aerobic and anaerobic respiration? The basic difference we have already seen. Aerobic respiration takes place in presence of oxygen, whereas anaerobic respiration takes place in absence of oxygen. Now, the first type of anaerobic respiration is very similar to that in aerobic respiration. Here also the glucose is converted into pyruvic acid in absence of O2. The reaction occurs in cytoplasm and the reaction is termed as glycolysis. Okay. Why it is then called as anaerobic respiration? Because the next reaction takes place in absence of O2. Okay. It is taking place in absence of O2. Okay. It occurs in bacteria and fungi. We know that bacteria are single cellular organisms and there are certain fungi which are also single celled organisms such as yeast. So in these lower organisms, mainly this anaerobic respiration is seen, and this process or the phenomenon is known as fermentation reaction. Okay, and the products of these reactions are mainly ethanol and carbon dioxide. Okay, in case of plants mainly, and in case of bacteria mainly, in case of bacteria and fungi. And this type of reaction occurs even in the higher organisms such as human. In humans it is mainly occurring into the muscle cells when we go for the heavy exercise. When we are carrying out heavy exercise, there will be a very less supply of oxygen to the muscles, and that's why the pyruvic acid is not properly oxidized to the respective product, that is carbon dioxide and water, and this incomplete oxidation will be resulting into the formation of lactic acid. Now you can see that in the previous case, when it was getting converted into, when pyruvic acid was getting converted into ethanol and carbon dioxide, there was generation of carbon dioxide, but in muscle cells there is no formation of carbon dioxide. Okay, so this particular process is decarboxylation, but the formation of lactic acid is not a decarboxylation process, as carbon dioxide is not released in this case. Clear to all? So when there is the product formation is ethanol and carbon dioxide, it is termed as decarboxylation. But in lactic acid formation, there is no carbon dioxide released out, and therefore this is not a decarboxylation reaction. Then how to convert lactic acid as well as ethanol into the respective products which are formed in the aerobic respiration? When we will talk specifically about the lactic acid, when the body is supplied with enough oxygen, when to the muscle cells enough oxygen is given, this lactic acid is converted back into carbon dioxide and water. Clear? Now, another important difference between the aerobic respiration and anaerobic respiration is the amount of energy generated. You can see in case of aerobic respiration, from a single glucose molecule, there are 38 ATPs generated. Okay, there are 38 ATPs generated, whereas in the anaerobic respiration from a single glucose molecule only 2 ATPs are generated. So which process is energy efficient? In which process lot of energy is released out or lot of energy is generated rather? It is aerobic respiration. Clear? It is aerobic respiration, and the ATP which are formed are further utilized to get the energy for the different processes which are occurring inside the cell. Now, what happens exactly when the ATP is broken down? You can see that in ATP there are three phosphate, adenosine triphosphate. So, during this breaking of phosphates, the terminal phosphate bond is very energy or energy consuming bond, we can say, or it is energy rich bond. So when this bond is broken down, there is lot of energy which is evolved out, and this energy is responsible for carrying out the different processes inside the cell. Okay, and that's why ATP can be used as the energy producing molecule into the different cellular activities. The terminal phosphate bond which is present in the ATP, when is broken down, there is, we can say, removal of energy, or there is generation of energy, and this energy is used to carry out different processes. Okay, clear to all what is type of respiration? There are two types of respiration. One is aerobic respiration and another one is anaerobic respiration. Aerobic respiration takes place in presence of O2, and anaerobic respiration is taking place in absence of O2. In aerobic respiration, the glucose is first converted into pyruvic acid. In absence of O2, remember, this process occurs in cytoplasm and is termed as glycolysis. The pyruvic acid, or commonly called as pyruvate, is further converted into carbon dioxide, water, and ATPs in presence of O2. The reaction occurs in mitochondrion, and it occurs through two main processes. The first one is Krebs cycle, which is a very important one, which is coupled with electron transport system, or it is also called as oxidative phosphorylation. In case of anaerobic respiration, the glucose is converted into pyruvic acid in absence of O2. The reaction occurs in the cytoplasm of the cell and is termed as glycolysis. But the pyruvic acid is having two fates. Okay, either it is converted into ethanol and carbon dioxide, or it is converted into lactic acid. Both the processes are termed as fermentation. This is simply called as fermentation, and this is called as lactic acid fermentation. So pyruvic acid can be converted into ethanol and carbon dioxide by forming two ATPs. The reaction occurs in absence of O2, and this reaction mainly occurs in bacteria and fungi. Okay, whereas this fermentation, another kind of fermentation which is also called as lactic acid fermentation, it occurs in lactic acid bacteria as well as in human, as we have already discussed, in the human muscle cells after heavy exercise. Okay, now in the next step we will study about this aerobic respiration in detail, and we will take into consideration the different pathways such as glycolysis, Krebs cycle, and the other process which is called as oxidative phosphorylation. Okay, For that, we will meet again in the next class. Okay, we will meet in the new video. So by that time, you can revise this topic, and I hope you have understood all these topics thoroughly. Okay. In next class, we will even solve the questions which are related to these two topics. Thank you.